Welcome to a brief introduction into infix, prefix, and postfix notation for ICS 211. So basically, what is infix, postfix, and prefix? It's three different ways of writing equivalent expressions, basically math expressions. We can write a times paren b plus c, close paren, divide by d, which means basically to first add b and c, multiply by a, and then divide by d. That's infix notation. Notice the operators are between the operands. The next line, second line down, is in postfix notation. The operators occur after the operands. And the last line is in prefix, where the operators occur before the operands. So you know, and so there are different properties, but each of these three lines means exactly the same thing of adding b and c, multiplying by a, and dividing by d. So, infix notation, it's the traditional normal notation. It's a notation that we learn about in elementary school for writing math. 3 plus 2 is 5, that kind of thing. So it requires additional information. In order to figure out what to do, you must know some things. One, you got to know the parentheses have the highest precedence. You need to do the things inside the parentheses before you do anything else. And you have to understand what operator precedence means. So multiply and divide has a higher precedence than plus. So if you saw a times b plus c with no parentheses, you would do the multiply first and then the addition second. That requires addition. That's why for this infix notation you say b plus c first, because it's inside of parentheses, and then you can do the multiply and then the divide. But it is sort of the traditional way that we know about. We've learned how to do writing expressions. In postfix, the operators are written after the operands. So in this case, you have a, b, c, and then we have the first operator, the plus, which says you take the two operands to the left of the operator, do the math, and then put the result into this thing, and then you can now do the multiply, get the result, and then do the divide with the d. So there are no parentheses. We process the equation or the expression from left to right, and when we hit an operator, we then take the two left operands and do the math. There is also no operator precedence because we apply the operators as we scan the expression. It is somewhat simpler to implement, and it also is, for postfix notation, it's very easy to implement this with a stack. So what we do is we just push the operands onto a stack. When we see an operator, we then pop the two operands off of the stack, do the math that the operator says we do, and push the result back onto the stack. So again, we would push A, B, C onto the stack. We see the plus, so we pop the B, the C, and the B, do the add, put the result back onto the stack. We then see the multiply, so we pop the B plus C value, multiply it by A, and push it back onto the stack. We see a D, we push the D on the stack, and then we see the divide, and so we pop the two things off the stack and do the divide, and we're done. Prefix notation is often called Polish notation. I don't know why. In this case, you put the operators before the operands. And so again, similar in the case of postfix, you don't need parentheses, because you process the operators and the operands as you scan the expression. And there again, no operator precedence. Unfortunately, this does not help you necessarily, because in this case, you sort of have to push the operators onto a stack and remember the operand. So when you see the plus and you see two operands B and C to the right of it, you can then apply the plus to the B and C, Then you now have the result, so now you can go back and see the times because you have two operands. Now you can do the A times the result, and then you have that value. Now you can do the divide with the result and D. But a little more complicated in how you process the expression. And thank you very much for paying attention to this brief introduction to infix, postfix, and prefix.